everyone, today we're taking a look at the Emax Hawk Apex 3.5. This apparently only comes in HDZero, and probably your first question right out of the gate is, why am I late? Well, I just wasn't prepared with all of the flying that I tend to like to do with quads before I do a review. So I needed a few more days, so I took those days. I do have a few questions, specifically for those that have seen a lot of other videos and you've kind of put some thought into it, this is a pretty sizable quad, and the typical 3.5 inch has been kind of a mixed breed of, you could freestyle it if that was your thing, or you could race it if you want. But this one seems to be specifically targeted for racing. It's got HDZero inside, and that's the only option, at least at this moment. And it's very light, but it's kind of big, like a 5 inch. And quite honestly, when you see me fly it, a word of caution, if you're not really comfortable flying yet, don't expect to fly this or something like this in the sort of confined space that I'm in. But back to those questions, I'm very curious about, is there a racing league, or is this about getting under 250 grams and being able to race? Maybe they're in other countries where you have maybe a hard limit for the weight and licensing and stuff like that. There's no exceptions. You just have to be under that weight. Maybe that's what this is kind of marketed for. But I found it very curious. They have the 3.5 inch and the 5 inch, but yet they kind of market the 3.5 inch as being able to compete against the 5 inch. Of course, I don't go to races. I'm not really a racer. I might have a little bit of a racing style. So I'm very curious to those of you that actually do go race and your thoughts on this particular quad and price point. The motors on the Hawk Apex 3.5 are the Eco 2, 2004, 3000 kV. The props are these new, lighter, kind of less thick Avia props. They're the 3630s, tri-bladed, of course. The all-in-one flight controller down here is an STM32 F722, 4-in-1 with a 25 amp ESC. And of course, we have the HDZero Whoop VTX and the RunCam HDZero camera. And Emax has made their own Express LRS receiver, so I have that option in this one. Battery connector is an XT30, and it has a 35 volt 470 microfarad capacitor attached to the battery lead. That capacitor would be better off up here, but I get it. This is kind of clean and easy. The battery strap is from Pyrodrone. No, not really. The battery strap they gave was huge and ridiculous, but that was noted that it was going to be oversized. The one they wanted to use wasn't in yet, so I took the super big Emax one, which is a nice one. It's just huge, and put in a Pyrodrone. Hello, Pyrodrone. We've got these two smaller sized of a rubberized battery mat, but they do not have a texture. They are smooth. These wires right here are the only wires that I found that actually come outside the body. So when you're flying yours around, if you choose to get one, make sure these are tucked up in there, because mine kind of popped out. I don't think they would catch on a prop because of the distance, but those wires hanging out there, it could catch a branch or something like that. Of course, it's got kind of a wishbone style of frame with my favorite tape that I oftentimes refer to as Emax tape. And that's it. Oh, we need to weigh it. On my scale, it weighs 184.5 grams. I flew it on this Emax 850 milliamp 4S battery, which is the recommended size. That brings us up to 281 grams, so over that 250. To get under the 250, I had to go all the way down to the 660 milliamp 4S G&B battery. Don't mistake it for the Cotters or these other G&Bs. These are heavier. These push you over 250 grams. Specifically, that battery gets you under 250 grams. But the flight time isn't going to be that long. And I've moved the quad, so the weight has changed. There we go. 248.5 grams. Nope, the long 720. Nope, that's too heavy for under 250 grams. The flowery G&B 650. Nope, that's over 250 grams too. And the Cotter. Yeah, it's going to be over 250 grams as well. 261 grams. So we gotta have that 660 to be under 250 grams. Carbon fiber looks to be 2.5 millimeters thick. Top plate looks to be 3 millimeters thick. We've got two bottom plates on there. I'll do my best to measure them. My guess is they're both 1.5 millimeters thick. This upper plate looks like it might be a touch thicker, but I can't get my calipers in there to get a bite on it. Of course, with arms this long, yeah, there's some flex in there, but it's not weak. I did get 2 extra props in the box, and I don't feel like this is retail packaging, so if you're interested in the extra goodies that you might get, probably need to check the website product descriptions to see if they include that information, because Surely we're not just getting 2 extra props. Okay, this is an after work flight. It's about 5:15, 5:20. We do have a touch bit of wind. Well, I shouldn't say a touch. It's kind of a touch for what we typically have around here. 9 to 12 mile an hour winds. And of course, I'm getting used to my new space still. I don't have a track or my flying paths quite down. I keep looking for the swing set as something fun to kind of do, but it's gone. Obviously, we've got the sod in, and so I'm going to do my best to kind of give this a racing sort of style spin around the yard, and then after this flight, we'll show a little bit of what I would say is kind of a tune test, where I just race it back and forth kind of hard, flying into my own prop wash as I turn around, and then I'll show you my most dramatic crash, which did have kind of an ugly sound to it, but the quad came out unscathed. Just a few scratches on the props and maybe a little bell dinged up, but not misshapen or anything like that. I flew it many times after that. So this guy is going to be a bit much for me to handle, and I would caution you, if you're not comfortable and you're watching this flight, if you're not comfortable in flight and you're watching this flight and you like the quad, I don't suggest flying it in a space like this unless, you know, unless you've got the skills. I think I'm kind of like riding a bull. I'm just kind of holding on here. It did take me about a dozen flights over the course of a few days to kind of find my camera angle happy spot. Camera angle, of course, oftentimes controls our speed. You know, we don't tend to want to look at the ground, so if we want to go fast, we want to see where we're going. I kind of got to this point on my camera angle, which was lower than how it came out of the box. Out of the box, it looked like it was about 55 degrees. And then I felt like I could handle it more, but I felt like I was ballooning up still. You know, ballooning up, I would go to turn, and I would get too high where I wasn't intending to. So some throttle management on this is going to be needed as well. It did come around for me after a while, but you still see a few times during the course of this flight where I don't have great throttle management. I do balloon up a little bit more than I should, or I just get completely out of shape carrying too much speed in order to make what I plan to be my next turn, where I just have to abandon that turn to be able to reduce some speed somewhere and go somewhere else to cut that speed down. Do a little ballerina pirouette over the pool there. Don't know why I did that. That's a first. Kind of a fun thing, I guess. I picked this flight because I end the flight and the battery isn't super low, because I found that was kind of an interesting little bit with this particular quad. Like, if I got the battery down to where, well, what you'll see in this video, but I do anything more than 5 or 6 seconds of flight, the battery would end up way low. And I don't like including that. I have a few times, but I don't want anybody to get the idea that that's how you should be flying your batteries, you know, down to 3.2 volts per cell. That's not what you should be doing. You know, on certain times, on certain quads, that might be okay, like whoops, when you're getting some high battery resistance on a HDZero connector. But on something like this, if you got that much battery sag, it might be time to change out the batteries. But you know, in my particular case, I just flew it too long. I think the flight had gone on for over 4 minutes on one particular case where I flew it down to like 2.7 volts per cell. Okay, I'm trying to handle it, and I'm going to fly in here, and I'm going to get tangled up in this tree because I don't do a great job of landing at this camera angle. Yeah, 3 minutes and 25 seconds with schmutz all over our camera lens from the Japanese maple. Thank you, Japanese maple, for not throwing that quad into my backside there. I appreciate that. But you see our battery voltage did come back up all the way to 3.66, so another 10 or so seconds would have been fine. Next up, we're going to do that little PID tuning sort of flight. Now we're going to take a look at that PID tuning where as I get into it here, I'm going to go back and forth in the yard and just kind of fly into my own prop wash, kind of that dirty air. So it tests the PID tune a little bit, also tests the props, and as well as the motors and the motor's ability to control those props. You know, different props have different prop wash handling, so it's not always just up to the PID tune. Sometimes the props can help us out as well. There it is, back and forth, back and forth. So I wanted to show that to you. It was something that I had done a few times to try to get comfortable with the quad, and I thought it might be of use to a few of you. Let's move on to my most dramatic crash. This isn't going to take a second here. We're going to get right to it. Blap.
Oh.
That didn't look terrible, but it sounded bad.
That was bad. Oh, jeez. That was bad.
So the crash that you saw, I'm pretty certain it happened over here because you can kind of tell from my props. They're kind of banged up. but they're not really misshapen or no chunks are taken out of them. The only reason I showed you that crash is, one, it sounded bad, and my initial impression was, oh, that was bad. All my other crashes were like glancing blows off of a tree, or I'd balloon up and I'd get tangled up in some of those lower tree limbs. So they really weren't hard impacts by any stretch. That was the hardest impact that I had, so I thought it was the most valuable to show. Speaking of these props, this is kind of a real design change for Emax. Emax usually makes a fairly thick and stiff prop, and this is actually quite flexible compared to other props that they have designed. So that's a change. That might mean for racing purposes that when you do have an impact, that the prop decreases the force that you might feel against your carbon or your motor, because the prop would bend and flex, versus maybe the other props are so stiff that the motor ends up getting a lot of force through the prop. No, just something I'm kind of spitballing about. There is motor protection out here at the end with that little horn. Of course, it's on all four corners. And we have kind of this, should we call that a double wishbone style of arm, where you kind of have one arm up here and another arm back here with differing angles. The back, or the inside set of arms, should be kind of a reinforcement arm, so to speak, and then it's wide up here. I guess maybe a better view would be to look at it from the bottom side. So these are independent pieces. They're not independent as a single motor arm, but to the front and the back. And they have the sandwich plates in here. It shouldn't be terrible to change out one of these wishbone arms. It looks like we've got, outside of the motor screws, we've got the standoff screws, so just these 4 screws that are really related to specifically getting the carbon out. Of course, we've got to unscrew our motors in order to be able to do that. Look at that, something I just noticed. What is that? You see that? Right there by my finger? Huh, it's on several of these motors. Is that, no, that's not balance putty. Thing. I hadn't noticed that before, but it's on a number of different places in the motors. Help me out. What is that for? I'm used to the balancing mud that they use in the bells, but that looks like some sort of glue or adhesive stuff. Need a motor expert, Ryan Harrell, to tell me what that is, but I'm sure many of you know. Back to the evaluation here. So Emax put a zip tie on there. Yay! I always talk about that if you watch the channel. We need some strain relief. Even it just gives us a fighting chance in those worst crashes that our battery goes flying, that it'll disconnect our battery connector rather than tugging on our flight controller. Flight controllers, all of our components are much more expensive than they used to be. The last thing we want to do is have a crash and a battery ejection, and because there's no zip tie, cause damage to an all-in-one flight controller that might cost, geez, depending upon the flight controller nowadays, might cost $80, $100. You can see we've got a USB-C connector right up here. You should be able to plug that in without any sort of problem. They've done a nice job of making sure the wires are out of the way, so plugging that in, not an issue. I didn't have an issue. I can't imagine anyone else would. You got plenty of space. It's a 3.5-inch quad. It is interesting that we have these other holes that the top plate was designed around, and I presume that that is so you could have a through stack, so that the stack would be extra secure, so it would be secured from not only the bottom but the top. But that does not, I guess this would be for a 20 by 20 stack. Can't really tell. I presume that this plate has 20 by 20 spots for a 20 by 20 traditional stack with a 4-in-1 ESC and then a flight controller on top. If you wanted to do some building, of course, we have these little cutouts so that we can have some nice flut and flash sort of screws, so everything looks real nice and clean. And they've got this little notch out for this little fin, which I don't know why you need this. And then you have a notch to kind of, I don't know, that seems like something we didn't need. But there could be a reason that I'm not thinking of. Chime off in the comment section below to let me know. So Emax did say that this will look different on production. I'm not sure in what way it'll look different, but different. And then they'll send an appropriately sized battery strap. You know, I couldn't even... You would have to put 2 of these 850s in there in order to get this battery strap to function. So I appreciate that they gave me a battery strap that I can use something for, but I'm a micro guy, so I don't know. I'm going to have to include this in a giveaway box, which I don't know that I've been doing. I may have been throwing stuff like this out. This is our firmware update port for HDZero. Yeah, sometimes you got to update as they improve something, whether it's add a new feature or just take care of a bug. This is the old Whoop board that has the perforations along these. So one of the other things I thought about when I had that crash was, because I've built Whoops with this board and crashed and noticed that over time that these can get weaker and snap off. Of course, it's not taking any direct impact in here unless you were to go tumbling through a tree, but I didn't see where any of mine and my tumbles and crashes, and when I smacked the pergola, it did snap any of those. I guess no, it doesn't look like it did at all. I can see pretty well in the front and the back. I don't know if I'm getting that good in the camera view, so I think it's all in good shape there. So now we're all the way to the end. Do you remember those questions that I had at the beginning? If you don't, I'll try to kind of rephrase them maybe. I'm curious about this and needing to be 250 for racing purposes, although I don't know how many laps you'll get, because on a 660 milliamp 4S battery, no, that doesn't hold voltage like it does on the bigger square 850s. I would be surprised if we get much more than, say, 2 minutes and 30 seconds possibly, depending upon your speed and the size of the course. Is the long course, is a short course. So something to note there. I'm curious though, is there a racing requirement out there for sub 250, or is it just a matter of trying to establish a new sort of racing market, or is it just a different quad? We don't have to be racers and go out and compete with others to enjoy a quad like this. So, fly what you like, whether it's this quad or something else, whether it's freestyle based quad or if it's a racing quad. Fly it however you like. It's your quad at that point, right? So I'm curious about that, and the price point. Yeah, price point might be a little bit of a stickler for this one. Let me click this browser tab I forgot over here. So on Emax's site, it's listed for $419.99. And this is the 3.5 inch version. The 5 inch version I don't have pulled up, but yeah, I'm curious about that price point. Seems a little high. Maybe it'll come down with time. Maybe in 2023. I don't know. Maybe it's just the fact that the component costs have just gone up. Manufacturing costs have gone up. Inflation, all those bad things when it comes to pricing. Maybe they are happening and they're hitting Emax. And so this is their product and this is the cost of the product so that they can continue to make more products for us. I don't know. But it's something that you should definitely check out. If you like this quad, is what else in this category should you also be looking at? Of course, I've reviewed a few other 3.5 inch quads. It's probably been 6 months or so since I've done those, but they're here on the channel. If you do have any comments, questions, suggestions, or otherwise, please let me know in the comments section below. I appreciate your time. And thanks for watching. Doing the flight. Doing the flight, do the flight, do the flight, do the flight, doing the flight.